Most of us at some point in our life reach a stage where we look at the world around us and we want to make things better. The older I get, the more I realize that the keys to making things better really lie in two domains: agriculture and health. I'm talking about physical health, but I'm also talking about environmental health, soil health, and the health of our economy. So health is a big word. So let's talk first of all about what needs betterment. And obviously, health is a big part of that. Here in the United States of America, our Centers for Disease Control recognizes that 60% of adults have one or more chronic diseases. Our economy is on a trend where increasingly fewer and fewer people hold more and more of the world's wealth. So that means a lot of people are doing without. This could be made better. Our environment. Anybody here worried about climate change? Anybody worried about water quality? Those of you who are maybe 50 years and older, did you have to buy so many water filters just to drink water when you were a kid? And of course, our relationships. We all talk about the loss of our family structure. Today, we're seeing difficulties with relationships in the workplace. And oh my gosh, you look at Congress and they can't even make a decision. They can't come to agreements on anything. Now, if you look at health, environment, relationships, and the economy, you can see that each of these domains can be broken into more detailed areas that might better describe what you see as the concerns in your life. Okay, maybe when you look at health, you say, well, we need better nutrition or we need better occupational health. Maybe you're not too concerned about climate change, but you recognize that we're losing biodiversity. So details are in there. But what's interesting to me about this model is that if you look at the center here and this circle, what we're showing is that these four domains, the health, the economy, the environment, and our relationships, are interrelated, which means if you damage one, it damages the next one. And if you improve one, it improves the next one. And so if you can imagine a little vortex here with the center, what we need to look for are those drivers at the center of this vortex that can turn it in the direction we want so that our health, our environment, our relationships, our economy, and all these other things out here become better. And what I'm going to show you is how microbiomes and mineral nutrients play into the center of this vortex and act as drivers that can bring big change. I believe that if we properly manage the microbes and the mineral nutrients in our environment, we can start seeing the food security that represents not only a good economy, but also good health. And we can see the happiness that each of us are looking for. So we really want betterment. We need to focus on efforts that improve our health, improve our environment, improve our economy, and improve our relationships with others. My perception of benefit actually began in the laboratory and field. I was studying plants, microbes, and mineral nutrients in agricultural systems. I got a PhD in molecular biology. I had minored in toxicology, and my goal was to use molecular biology techniques to engineer genes, engineer microbes that could clean up the environment. Now, that goal didn't live very long. As soon as I got into graduate school, within a semester of taking coursework, it became clear to me that microbes in the environment are diverse and promiscuous, which means they breed very, very quickly, they evolve very quickly, and there are so many different kinds out there that it is much more efficient to manipulate that microbial community by giving it the nutrition it needs and the air and the water and the environmental conditions that it needs for the right kind of beneficial microbes to survive, then it is efficient to engineer genes, because when you engineer a gene into a microbe, you've got to take the microbe out of its natural environment, grow it up for several generations in test tubes. When you start doing that, that microbe starts losing all the genes that kept it strong and resilient in the environment, and they become very dependent on the nutrition that you're giving them in the laboratory and the nice temperatures and growing conditions that you're provided. So when you take them out and put them back in the jungle, so to speak, they get eaten by the other microbes. And this is very, very expensive and very inefficient when you consider what it costs to isolate those microbes, grow them up in the laboratory, engineer the genes, test them, get them approved for environmental safety, and then reintroduce them. This was an area of research that in the 80s showed some promise, but it was very quickly abandoned. And I was studying environmental science as the failure of this approach was being recognized. So when I graduated, I was fortunate enough to land a job at the USDA Jornada Experimental Range in southern New Mexico. This was actually a desert ecology research group. And what I liked about it is that even though my personal research effort was very lab oriented, I had to go out and collect samples now and then, and that gave me some exposure to the outdoors, which is really what I would have done originally is plot a career outdoors. Now, I'll be honest, the reason I gravitated toward the lab had as much to do with the economy and the farm crisis as it had to do with the fact that I just wasn't cut out for it. I'd always had a lot of health problems. I had some severe allergies, and by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was pretty much allergic to anything you could put in front of me. And so my ability to work well for long hours outdoors was pretty limited. But for a time at the Jornada, I was really getting the best of both worlds and was able to learn some really exciting things about how plants and microbes interact both in the laboratory and in natural systems. Now, the power of the research I did was that it really allowed us to team up with ecologists who were looking at very large scale interactions. And so we were really looking at dynamics that occurred all the way from the gene to the landscape. In the lab, I looked at plant chemistry, I looked at microbial genetics, I looked at lots and lots of plant cells under the microscope. In the field, we evaluated the field performance of native plants with and without added microbes. Not surprisingly, we learned that the microbial genes we were finding in native plants were identical to the microbial DNA found in the wildlife intestines. This gave me unsurprising evidence that our gut microbiomes are literally inoculated with microbes in the food that we eat. We also got to look at essential oils, and we saw that the oils produced in the leaf surfaces of plants not only regulate plant genes, but they can also attract or repel herbivores, things like plant pests or even cattle, and they can also defend the plant against disease. One of our biggest discoveries was that plants themselves have microbiomes. In fact, I believe I have one of the first publications out there that talks about the plant in terms of its microbiome. Now, when things got really exciting in terms of the research is when we begin to take the microbes out of these native plants, microbes that lived inside desert shrubs, and put them inside some of the crop plants because we saw tremendous boosts in plant performance once they had the added microbes. We saw higher yields, we saw more vigorous plants, they seemed to have more tolerance to pest and disease. But as we began to see these improvements in plants, as a result of simply adding microbes, we saw that this was a much quicker, much more efficient, and much less expensive way of improving plant performance than anything that had been achieved by plant breeders or genetic engineers over the last century. Now, one of my mentors up to this time and my partners in looking at the plant microbe interaction was a scientist by the name of Jerry Barrow. Jerry was a geneticist who had graduated from the same genetics program that produced Norman Borlaug. And so the legacy of the Green Revolution was always prominent in Jerry's mind, and it often came up in our discussions. For those of you not familiar with the Green Revolution, this was a term that was used to describe the increase in global food production that was seen after World War II as a result of research that was funded by USDA and the Rockefeller Foundation and carried out by Norman Borlaug. So Norman Borlaug took wheat strains down to Mexico, where you have several different climate zones and different growing seasons, And he was able to produce up to 4 crops a year by growing in different locations. And because he was able to do this, he could breed wheat and select wheat strains very, very quickly. He had the research budget, and what he focused on was developing wheat that could tolerate high doses of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer without toppling over. So he developed these short, stocky hybrids of wheat that they could pour the fertilizer on and get very high yields. As a result, within 10 years of launching his breeding program, he had increased wheat production in Mexico fourfold. News of this hit other countries. This was the post-World War II era. There was a lot of hunger around the world, and soon he had developed similar programs in India, Pakistan, Turkey, and eventually, as we saw wheat production increase in all these countries, the transformation in agriculture that resulted really moved agriculture into the industrial age, and the movement was dubbed the Green Revolution. Now, early on, scientists, including a guy by the name of Mankombu Swaminathan, who worked directly with Norman Borlaug in India, were beginning to realize that there are some problems that occur when you keep increasing yields with nitrogen fertilizer. And these have to do with the long-term soil health, the long-term plant nutrition, and the sustainability of agriculture. And so Swaminathan began as early as the 1970s to promote the need for an evergreen revolution as opposed to a green revolution. The evergreen revolution was supposed to be a more sustainable or regenerative type approach, something that can keep going and doesn't lead us to what he called an era of agricultural disaster. Norman Borlaug's work was also considered controversial by people in alternative health fields. And as our awareness of seasonal allergies, food sensitivities, and things like celiac disease has increased over time, more and more people are looking back to the Green Revolution. Today, about 80% of the wheat that's grown anywhere in the world is coming out of strains that were developed by Norman Borlaug, and we're seeing these tremendous gluten intolerances and wheat allergies and food sensitivities. And a lot of people are asking if this has something to do with Green Revolution technology. So when Dr. Jerry Barrow, myself, and Dr. Isaac Reyes, Dr. Pedro Osuna, this was the group I was working with, as we looked at the yield increases we were achieving by transferring native microbes from shrubs like creosote bush into plants like tomatoes, we came to believe that the key to launching this evergreen revolution lay in promoting the growth of microbial communities that support plant health. It was a very simple concept with powerful consequences. Locally adapted microbes, like those found in creosote bush in the southwestern United States, can be found anywhere in native plants. And so very locally adapted plants could, in theory, be developed from this. And they could be developed at very small scales. You wouldn't need a multinational corporation to provide the investment money to develop new strains. It's because these End-O-Fites stay inside the host plant. Once you transfer them into a new strain, the odds are high that these transferred microbes will persist in that strain across generations. You basically create a new seed line. And so we begin to envision the ability to grow food with fewer pesticides, fewer synthetic chemicals, and more microbes. And we saw this clearly as a plus for the environment. We saw it clearly as a plus for the agriculture, for the producers and the people trying to keep their farms. As time went by, I also began to see that this had benefits for human nutrition. And of course, keeping our farms productive has always been recognized as a powerful tool for keeping local economies strong. And so more and more we were recognizing the evergreen revolution as the key to betterment, and microbes associated with soils and plants as the key to an evergreen revolution. It was good for the environment, good for health, good for the economy, and good for building those relationships with our community that come when you have strong local businesses. In 2012, I began writing a concept paper that illustrated the ways microbial diversity in ag soils could mitigate damaging effects of climate change, restore degraded lands, make farming more profitable for local growers, meet global food security needs, and improve human nutrition. I didn't write this alone. USDA scientists from 4 locations and university scientists from 3 countries were among my collaborators. Despite so much expertise, our paper got rejected by a number of top journals, and after 2 years of revision and resubmission, and after removing all the discussion of human nutrition and benefits to local scale economies, it was published in an open access chapter in a peer-reviewed textbook. Now, the good side to this is that open access means anybody with internet access anywhere in the world can read this article free of charge. In that book chapter, we included an image that indicates the function of microbes and minerals in agricultural systems. Minerals here are referring to the mineral nutrients that are normally found in soils, but in croplands you may have to add more mineral nutrients, or depending on your location, you may have to add enough mineral nutrients to keep the microbial community endogenous to the soil thriving, particularly in croplands that are heavily farmed and continually removing materials from the system. Now, I realize the font in this picture is small, so let me describe what's in the picture. We're illustrating that the top surface of the soil, microbes that line the crust there, are capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen, which means that if you leave the crust undisturbed, you're actually making fertilizer right there on the farm, because the air around us is 78% nitrogen. And when you have enough nitrogen fixing bacteria on the soil surface, we also found nitrogen fixers on the plant surface and even inside the plant. When you have these present, you're capturing a lot of atmospheric nitrogen, and you don't need so much fertilizer. Carbon sequestration is going on. All these microbes are taking greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane out of the atmosphere and pumping them into the soil, where they turn them into things like cell walls and proteins and sugars and foods, for not only for the plants, but for the microbes and the critters that live in the soil. Minerals get mobilized. Some of these soil microorganisms, like fungi, are capable of dissolving mineral nutrients from rocks. So they provide the phosphorus and potassium and calcium and other things that plants need to grow well and that you need in your diet, simply by mobilizing them from soil particles. The microbes surrounding these plants provide defense from the environment, from insects, pests, and disease, and they also help regulate the plant growth. They can turn on signal molecules that tell the plant when to flower, when to send out more roots, and when to do things that help support its growth. When you have a lot of microbes in the soil, you end up with soils that are fertile, aggregated, and have a high water holding capacity, a high WHC. You have a plant that's nutritionally self-sufficient. Notice that the grain produced on this plant is also going to be loaded with microbes that help mobilize nutrients and protect the grain from pest and disease. And as I said earlier, when you eat this grain, your gut is going to get inoculated with diverse communities of microorganisms. My current interests in human nutrition were really born as I looked at this image. During one of the many revisions we made on the article, I was sitting at my desk looking at this drawing, and I was literally rubbing my back as I sat, trying to staunch the pain, because I had developed a chronic pain disorder that was so intense it was becoming hard to work. I had a headache, my eyes were hurting, and so I'm sitting there in pain, studying this picture, thinking about what I needed to change to get the paper published. And in the back of my mind, I was worried about my health. I was worried that my health was declining, my work performance was slowing down, And I had been to doctors for years. I'd had dozens of diagnoses and nothing in the way of a treatment that actually reversed the progression of this pain. And so I was getting scared about my ability to stay in the workforce. But as I looked at this picture and I looked at the grain and the microbes in that grain, and I thought about the fact that we have moved to this other kind of agriculture where we damage the soil with tillage and we spray chemicals that kill all these microbes. And now we're growing plants in soils that are infertile, erosion prone, compacted, and they have a low water holding capacity. So not only is this bad for the farmer, but it's also bad for human nutrition because now we're eating grains that are void of all that microbial genetics, all the biochemicals, and all the nutrients that come in a grain grown on healthy soils. So I thought about my own health and all the dietary changes I'd made over the years trying to improve my health, and I had never really seen improvements. And as I sat here looking at this picture, I realized, oh my gosh, this is why shopping from the produce aisles of the outer aisles of the grocery store simply isn't going to be enough to turn your health around. Because the food that we're selling in the supermarkets simply isn't going to have the nutrition that we require to sustain our health. And this was a profound insight for me. First of all, it was the beginning of a big turnaround in my health. I'm doing much better today. But it was also the moment when I realized that the work I was doing was about so much more than publishing papers and getting research grants. I realized that billions of people in the developed world today are eating food produced by the plants on the right, as opposed to food produced by plants on the left. And I realized that so much of the sickness, the poverty, and even the conflict we see in the world is the direct result of the subsidized agricultural technologies that are promoting the loss of microbes and minerals from our soil. These same technologies take soils that naturally combat the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and turn our farm soils into one of the leading causes of water pollution and climate change. The remarkable thing here is that you can reverse this easily. If you restore the soil, you restore the microbial diversity, you restore the nutritional quality in the soil, these soils are also going to become the primary solution for climate change. They're going to help reduce pollution, clean our waters, and improve our health. And so when I looked at how simple the solution is and how many government dollars we're spending to promote the wrong technology, I couldn't help but ask myself, how have we become so stupid? And this is when I finally understood the words said long ago by President Ronald Reagan: government is the problem. It's the subsidies that drive people to think about how they can please the government as opposed to how they can do the right thing for their soil. This was a really uncomfortable moment for me because, quite frankly, I worked for the government. And as I came to terms with this reality, I felt the need to let people know why so many of us are sick, why we've got multi-billion-dollar healthcare bills, and how we can easily turn things around. I also saw why taking supplements is a good idea. But the more that I became passionate about sharing this understanding of plant health, the more the government agency I worked for felt the need to move me farther and farther into the field. I was told I could not work on crop plants. I had to work only on native plants. And initially it made sense. We were, after all, a rangeland research institution. But I knew that my physical ability to succeed doing field research was simply limited, and it was only a matter of time before my health would fail completely. I was also seeing that even if I was working up to par, the people we had hired to work in the lab did not have the skills that were needed to work in the field. And so we were simply not making good management decisions in terms of where the research should go. This led me to explore opportunities to perhaps transfer to a new position. I thought maybe I could be of more value to the agency working in a crop science unit. The truth is, I really didn't understand the politics I was up against. And in hindsight, I realized that for many years I had been saying things in presentations and conversations with program leaders that were not helping advance my research. There's an old song by Johnny Cash where he sings about lessons learned the hard way. He talks about writing hot checks down in Mississippi and how this taught him that there's no good chain gang out there. As I think back about my years in government, I learned some of those hard kind of lessons as well. I learned there are things you don't say when dealing with decision makers who handle the funding and the budgets. You don't say we're developing a technology that's affordable in every community, and this technology can make GMOs obsolete. You don't ask, why transfer a single gene when you can move an entire microbial community full of genes simply by managing the nutrition? You don't say, imagine a technology for improving food production and human health and nutrition that can also clean the environment and create opportunities in every community. I learned my mistake when I began this quest for a position transfer, because this search led me to a lengthy conversation with a national program leader. The gentleman asked a lot of questions about my research and never challenged it. He never challenged the potential of the claims we were making about microbes in the soil. But he very quietly and methodically explained to me as the conversation drew to a close that the agency would never support my research, frankly, because the agency would never support any technology that did not benefit the agrochemical companies. Within hours of that conversation, my passwords quit working on my computer, my staff was reassigned, my budget got downsized, and then I got a call from an unknown entity who started advising me to buy insurance and was trying to sell me an insurance plan. But when I told her I wasn't interested and went to hang up the phone, she shouted at me. She said that I needed insurance because I was sick and I was going to lose my job. I'll never know who made the phone call, but I do know that no one outside of my husband, my doctor, and my boss knew that I had recently been diagnosed with a debilitating condition. Nobody knew that my doctor was advising me to retire. By the time that day was over, my career in research had been marked for termination, and my understanding of the government by and for the people was permanently transformed. Now, the fact is, when the rug got pulled out so suddenly, I became very ill. I spent the next year largely bedridden, looking for cures, improving my diet, and reviewing the history of the agricultural, food, and nutrition policies that are stripping the microbes and the mineral nutrients we all need for survival out of the soils and the foods we are providing to consumers. I became convinced that the need for better food systems is central to every major problem facing the world today. You don't like what's happening in the environment? Fix agriculture. Healthy soils clean up the atmosphere and provide us with clean water. Don't like the growing disparity between the rich and the poor? Fix agriculture. Bring these food systems closer to home. Reward the farmer for doing the right thing. Don't like what we're paying for health care? Grow, prepare, and serve better food. Don't like inflation? Fix our soils. Inflation is, among other things, a direct indicator of the availability, the supply and demand for natural resources. When our soils become depleted, food costs go up. Don't like massive immigration? Worried about what's happening on the border? Fix agriculture. When people have land, food, and opportunities to grow close to home, they don't migrate. Want biodiversity? Fix agriculture. When everybody is growing different crops, you provide all kinds of habitat for all kinds of organisms, not only on the farm, but in the surrounding areas. And when you're spraying entire swaths, thousands of acres with pesticides, you're wiping out entire webs of food that support birds, frogs, amphibians, lizards, snakes, and all this biodiversity that we're losing. But the fact is, when there are so many government policies encouraging the use of practices that reduce the biodiversity of our soils, eliminate nutrients from our food, and inactivate the enzymes that support our metabolism, what can the average person do? Well, we can start by fixing our health. We really need strong, healthy people to rebuild our food systems. We need to stop equating good food with cheap food. We need to stop settling for nutrient-depleted, biologically inactive, packaged processed foods. And we need to value ourselves, our families, and our farmers enough to be willing to pay for more food that is grown properly and actually offers the nutrition that we need. When you choose to feed your children that flavorless, odorless produce offered at the grocery store, you better recognize the need to supplement it with the vitamins, minerals, aromatherapy molecules, and other phytochemicals that are found on produce grown in healthy soils and harvested ripe. And when you recognize that good food costs more than your budget allows, you better redesign your budget, because I guarantee you, good food does not cost more than losing a job or getting passed over for a promotion due to low productivity and too many sick days. Good food does not cost more than hospitalization. It does not cost more than surgery. It does not cost more than chronic malnutrition. So whatever your stage in life, learn to think beyond convenience and purchase food for its quality. And we fix our economy by spending our dollars closer to home. Buying from people you know, buying from companies that show you where the money is flowing. The person who sits in the White House, the people who write the legislation, and the leaders who serve in our Congresses and courts are always going to be influenced most by those who have the time and the money to seek their audience. And this means that the programs that get funded and the efforts supported by the government and the standards and quality checklists that are issued by the government are always going to be designed to serve the special interests of those who have the time and money to seek the audience of these leaders. They're always going to serve interests like those of the chemical companies at the expense of the individual taxpayers. Think about it. The only way that 535 members of Congress can reach a decision when serving 327 plus million Americans is to ignore the voices of at least 327 million Americans and distill the remaining ideas down to a soundbite. That soundbite is always going to reflect the interests of those who can be heard above the noise. Government is never going to make things better for you and I because the structure of government does not allow this to happen. Government programs simply don't work. So use what you have access to. If you're already getting grants from the government, continue to vote for the best choices available, but don't think that voting at the polls is enough. Your real vote lies where you spend your dollar. Research the products and the companies you purchase from. Learn their history, understand their mission. Visit with their staff and their decision makers. Buy from people you know and trust rather than brands you recognize because they spent a lot on marketing. When you buy from people you know, people whose products are greener and more transparent, you promote healthier people, healthier ecosystems, and you bring your economy closer to home. 70% of every dollar you spend locally gets spent in your community. And when you buy from local farmers and let them know that healthy food matters, you're making a vote in favor of better food. So vote with your dollar. We need to start taking risks and going beyond what's convenient. We need to be the hands on the ground that are fixing our soils, healing our neighbors, and feeding our children. We need to take personal responsibility for ensuring that we are providing the best food possible to the people around us. We need to take leadership in rejecting unhealthy foods while recognizing that all of us will make compromises daily until most of us are living in a better food system. So if you see me eating a French fry, don't judge me. Don't waste energy judging your neighbors. We don't have time to start pointing fingers at one another. Just do your best to eat right and offer better choices to those around you. Help us build diverse support networks that value food not only for its price and packaging, but also for the vitamins, the cofactors, the enzymes, the probiotics, the prebiotics, and the mineral nutrients the food provides. The Extension team is building better health by uniting farmers and gardeners with health and wellness professionals. We're working with small business leaders and also with consumers who eat good food. Some of our efforts include teaching people how to garden, teaching people better nutrition strategies. We're even running a scholarship fundraiser each fall for students in regenerative agriculture. Any one of these tasks would be impossible alone, but many hands make light work. So, in my mind, Betterment is represented by the intersection between good nutrition and regenerative agriculture. Where these two systems cross, we create healthy soils, healthy people, and healthy ecosystems. The healthy soils create a clean environment. We bring the global economy to the farm, and the farm to the global economy when we agree to buy from local farmers. And we build relationships between growers and people who value nutrient-dense food. This is more or less the mission of the Extension team. How does our model compare to global betterment goals? Well, if you look here, the diagram shows a list of 17 goals established by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization represents minds from countries all over the world who have come together and looked at what needs to be better. Now, they work through politics, we're working from the ground up. But let me show you how efficiently we can address all of these goals with small teams working for regenerative agriculture and good nutrition. The first goal involves no poverty. Our nutrition team works on building small businesses that bring income back into the communities, and our commitment to buying from one another helps circulate money close to home. Zero hunger. Our efforts to help regenerative farmers get established help increase the availability of food locally and help prevent food insecurity. Our nutrition companies that we're partnered with help address any mineral deficiencies and nutrient deficiencies that remain as we work for better farm systems, because farms don't turn around overnight. Good health and well-being comes when people are well-fed and receiving all the nutrients they need. Quality education is on-the-job training. Quality education is small scale, it's hands-on. It's you listening to a presentation simply because you want to learn. Every member of our team is constantly engaged in sharing this message and teaching people how to build their local businesses, how to improve their health and nutrition, how to support local farms. Even just showing people where the local farms are is new for people who have always purchased their food from a grocery store. Gender equality. We're working in industries that engage a lot of women in efforts that build local business and build local leadership. Clean water and sanitation. Through our nutrition efforts, we offer sources of better water. Regenerative farming is a miraculous technique for cleaning entire watersheds, because when your soil functions, your water gets cleaned. Affordable and clean energy. When growers shift to more regenerative farming techniques, their energy costs go down. They're not shipping so many tons of agrochemical back and forth, and they're producing more biofuel. Decent work and economic growth, local nutrition businesses, local farms, great opportunities for local leadership, local entrepreneurship. And really, we focus on building entrepreneurs because we know that when people develop those entrepreneurial skills, they're creating jobs. So if you focus on entrepreneurship development, the jobs and the economic growth will come. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. You build the entrepreneurs, you're going to build the industry, you're going to build the innovation, you're going to build the infrastructure. Reducing inequalities. Hey, we'll work with anybody who is interested in regenerative farming or good nutrition. Sustainable cities and communities. Build local farms, and you associate those farms with people who truly appreciate the value of locally grown produce, good nutrition, healthy soils, healthy economies. And your cities are going to become sustainable. Responsible consumption and production. You know, after working so many years in a government agency, there was nothing like starting my own business to help me recognize the value of resources I took for granted. Climate action. Oh my gosh, regenerative agriculture does so much to clean the climate. And when you fix the land, you fix the water table, life below water improves as well. In fact, a couple of the people that I work with are engaged in developing biostimulants that they are making by harvesting the invasive species to help improve the quality of the water for fishing and other uses. The big difference comes from improving the soil because, again, you fix the soil and you don't have all this stuff running off into the waterways and disrupting coral reefs and fishing waters and quality waters. Life on land. When farming occurs at a smaller scale, you create more diversity of habitats. And the number one reason for the loss of biodiversity basically is twofold. Habitat loss is widely recognized as the number one killer. By creating small local farms, you create habitats. And the second big loss of biodiversity that just doesn't get enough media attention is the loss that occurs from the pesticides and chemicals we just deposit on large swaths of land because we're wiping out entire microbial populations and insect populations that feed other organisms. And so we're wiping out food sources. Peace, justice, and strong institutions, these come from building the relationships and the partnerships that develop when you focus on local business. And our nutrition network engages people from all walks of life who are committed to a common goal. And finally, the partnerships. We are uniting growers with entire networks of people interested in health and wellness, people who recognize the value of food grown on regenerative farms, on healthy soils. And these partnerships are designed to last a lifetime. So let me share a few closing thoughts. To kind of sum up the points of this discussion, I want to say that our soil quality is a major driver of much of the environmental decline we're seeing, as well as the nutritional and health declines we're seeing in the public. Our soil has lost the microbes and the mineral nutrients that are needed to keep food healthy. A lot of food safety regulations are promoting technologies that inactivate microbial communities and cellular enzymes, which are important for keeping food functional. Now, they're not doing it to inactivate the food. They're doing it to prevent toxic bacteria from thriving so people don't get food poisoning. But you lose a lot with these safety measures. And once again, a way around these is to grow food in your backyard garden that nobody else has to regulate. You're going to get fresher food, safer food, and more functional food. If you can't grow in your own garden, that's where you need small local farms, farms that are too small to be subject to the very strict regulations that industrial farmers are subject to. I'm not in any way cross with industrial farmers. I think we need them. There are always going to be times when local farms don't produce and you need something from a larger scale. I'm simply saying that we need to supplement what we are relying on from industrial farms with fresh local food grown on small local farms, because that's where our freshest, highest quality food and most bioactive, most functional food is going to come from. As a result of the loss of soil microbes, the loss of nutrients, the loss of cellular enzymes and functional microbial communities. Basically, natural, locally grown food is loaded with probiotics that we don't get in our diet when they're run through food safety controls. As a result, our Centers for Disease Control recognizes that about 60% of the adult population in the US is chronically ill. This is phenomenal. This is like the Black Death, with one big difference. When the Black Death hit centuries ago, people died within 2 weeks. While that's tragic, it didn't wipe out the family savings. It didn't sell the souls of the next generation to the doctors and the bill collectors. So in some ways, we're experiencing something much more tragic today. Government cannot fix this problem that's affecting the health of so many of us. Every program government has introduced over the last century to address nutrition, agriculture, economic health, and so forth has simply exacerbated the problem. The solutions aren't going to come from government, and we have to quit looking to government to solve the problem. We have the answers. We need to fix these problems. Local food, healthy soils, small business, voting with your dollar, changing what you eat, and building networks that share your belief are tools that can change the world. If you'd like to partner with us, contact any member of the Extension team at ourextensionteam.com to learn what you can do to get involved.